All right, today we're cracking open the playbook from one of the most famous business books of the 1980s, The Art of the Deal. We're going to break down the core principles and the big case studies that the author laid out way back in 1987, all to get inside the mind of a dealmaker.
Right from the first chapter, this one quote really sets the tone for everything. It's framing deal-making not just as a way to make money, but as a kind of creative, competitive sport. You know, like an artist painting on a canvas. And that's the central idea we're going to keep coming back to. The deal itself is the real prize.
So here's how we're going to break it down. First, we'll dig into that idea of deals as art. Then we'll get into the nitty-gritty with the elements of the deal. After that, we'll see how these tactics play out in two huge case studies, Trump Tower and the Wollman Rink. And finally, we'll pull it all together to understand the dealmaker's mindset.
Okay, let's start with that big idea. The book makes the case that what really drives a dealmaker isn't the final number on a spreadsheet, but the pure excitement of the process, the thrill of the game itself.
And this idea of deal-making as a game is tied to a really specific work style described in the book. The author writes, "I play it very loose. I don't carry a briefcase. I try not to schedule too many meetings." This kind of unstructured approach is presented as the key to being imaginative and opportunistic, to really stay in that present moment, whereas the book says, the fun is.
So how does that big picture philosophy actually work in practice? Well, this next section is all about what the author calls his trump cards. These are the core principles for how you approach and how you win a negotiation.
These 6 elements are really the tactical heart of the book. It all kicks off with think big, the argument being it takes just as much energy as thinking small. But, and this is a big but, it's balanced by protect the downside, which is all about planning for the worst-case scenario. The others, maximizing your options so you're never desperate, knowing your market, using your leverage, they're all about setting the stage to ultimately deliver the goods.
Which brings us to our first case study, the creation of Trump Tower. The book really presents this whole project as a masterclass in using all those principles to tackle some huge obstacles right in the heart of Manhattan.
And this was the big one. I mean, the book describes this as a super complex puzzle involving air rights, zoning rules, and trying to convince city planners to okay a massive glass tower in a really classic part of town. So how did the author say he actually pulled it off?
Well, here is where the book points to that use your leverage principle in a really clever way. It describes having architects build 2 models. The first one was an as-of-right building, basically a design they could legally build without any special permission, which the book calls hideous. By showing this ugly alternative to city planners, the preferred, much sleeker design suddenly looked like a fantastic option for the city.
But leverage wasn't just about building models, it was also about the press. The book talks about taking a huge risk by showing the plans to the powerful architecture critic at the New York Times before the city even voted. The amazing review that came out of it is painted as a major turning point, giving the project credibility and public support. The argument is simple. Good press is way more valuable than any ad you could ever buy.
And after all that maneuvering, you get to the final and maybe most important principle, deliver the goods. The book throws this number out there, an estimated profit of $50 million just from the apartment sales, to frame the whole project as not just an architectural win, but a massive financial one too.
Okay, so our next case study from the book is a totally different beast. The story of the Wollman Rink renovation in Central Park is presented as this dramatic tale of public sector failure versus private sector speed and efficiency.
Just look at this timeline, because according to the book, it tells you everything you need to know. What the city couldn't get done in 6 years, the author publicly declared he could do in just a few months. It was a huge gamble, pitting his reputation directly against the city's entire bureaucracy.
So let's put some numbers on the city's effort, as laid out in the book. 6 years, almost $13 million spent. And the result? Complete failure. The project was so messed up that the city announced it had to scrap everything and just start over from scratch. And then you have the book's account of what happened next. After taking over in June of 1986, the rink was finished and open to the public by November of the exact same year. The final tally? It came in $750,000 under budget and a month ahead of schedule. The contrast is, well, it's pretty stark.
So when you take these tactics, these case studies, what's the big idea holding it all together? This final section is all about piecing together the personal advice that's woven throughout the entire book.
Throughout the book, you find these little nuggets of personal philosophy. There's a huge emphasis on intuition. Listen to your gut and stick with what you know.
It also preaches patience, saying sometimes the best investments are the ones you don't make. And you couple that with a really aggressive stance to fight back very hard, all while never forgetting that core theme: have fun.
And that brings us right back to where we started, full circle. This quote really hammers home that opening idea. The book's philosophy pretty much boils down to this: the deals, the challenges, the wins, that's the art. The money, that's just how you keep score.
So after all of this, what does the book suggest is the single most important quality a dealmaker can have? After all the tactics and strategies, the book's answer is surprisingly simple. It says, more than anything else, I think dealmaking is an ability you're born with. Mostly it's about instincts. So the ultimate message here is that yes, anyone can learn the playbook, but the real art, that might just come from a place you can't teach. Thanks for tuning in.